Good afternoon. In the afternoon, we're starting the session on New Economic Theory. This session is going to run the entire afternoon, but at the coffee break, which we'll take it at 4 o'clock. After the coffee break, we will have two sessions. The session on revaluing nature will be in this room, and those who would like to continue in the discussion on New Economic Theory will move to the next room. The structure for our session is we're going to have two initial presentations, and I would request our two presenters to try to limit to 10 minutes each. Thank you. And then we're going to go through a structured series of discussions in which we look to you to be actively already involved. We have 6 panel topics, and we'll introduce them one at a time, and have a panel of 3 speakers for each topic. Each speaker speaks for us 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for about 15 minutes of discussion. So based on the morning, we saw that the discussion and comments from participants were as valuable as those from the presenters, and we want to have much more time for that in the afternoon session. That's our intention. Just a very brief introduction. This session takes forward a program of the Academy that's been very active over the last 2.5 years since Ivo first proposed that we examine New Economic Theory, and since we met with Oreo in May of 2010, a very significant month in the history of the Academy, and Oreo proposed the starting of Cadmus Journal. Over the last, now we'll be on our completing our 3rd year of Cadmus in May. We published a series of articles, most from within the Academy, but many interesting contributions from members of the Club of Rome, some of whom were not fellows of the Academy, and others as well, really exploring this issue from a very wide framework. From a framework that takes into account legal aspects, technological aspects, sociological aspects as well. And what we'd like to do now, after having spent 3 years, almost 3 years, both in meetings of the Academy and in joint meetings or in meetings of the Club of Rome, where we've had a wonderful interaction and a partnership where we take ideas and continue the discussion in one session after another and build on it to such an extent that nobody can know who owns anything anymore. We are all the owners of this intellectual property, but a very creative collaboration. What we'd like to do is say that, look, we all agree that we need new economic thinking, not just new economic policy. We're all clear on that, and we're all pretty clear on the deficiencies and shortfalls of current theory. Robert Hoffman has an article in the last issue of Cadmus, which has done or previous issues done a very good job, and we've looked at it from many different points of view. What's wrong with the measures? What's wrong with the theory, and so forth. The question is now, can we go beyond the critique of the past and try to sketch out what might be the framework or the elements of a new conceptual framework? We're not going to rush to say that in 4 hours or 4 days we need to come up with that, but we're looking now to explore through these panel discussions what might be the parameters, what might be the circumference, what might be important elements that need to be considered in a new theory of economy. And for that, we need very much inputs from all the disciplines represented here, and all of those represented in the Academy, because this is too important a topic to say that it's the purview of only one group. So I'd like to start with Oreo, who's really at the foundation of this work. And I'd just like to say, Oreo has been working on this theme for more than 3 decades, published numerous reports for the Club of Rome on this very important report. We've tried to highlight a lot of those earlier reports and articles in Cadmus because we think that they've still not received the attention they deserve, the ideas that are in them. And we hope that the discussion today will help us build on that and take it forward.
Thank you. I'll try to be short. For an Italian, is a big problem. After all, yes. I would like to present to you just an idea in 5 minutes and less if possible. I think that a lot of discussions are going on everything we discussed this morning and we will discuss tomorrow about the idea of relaunching the economy. Basically is to create more wealth. Well, let me just give you 2 references. I hope you will not be discouraged. If anything, think that we can do something together, then let me know. The first one is the idea of Galileo Galilei. Why? Well, Galileo Galilei said something very simple. The Earth is moving around the Sun. Very simple, isn't it? Which means that revolutions can be very easy to describe. And then find a very hard opposition. Okay? So very easy on the one side. So let's not be complicated, saying that our period is terrible in economic terms. Maybe it's much easier. The second point is about Galileo Galilei, is that he created a reaction against him. Now, who is the Galileo Galilei of the economists today? You never thought of that. I had this idea yesterday morning. The Galileo Galilei was Adam Smith. Why? Adam Smith, first of all, was not an economist. Don't forget, the word economist has been started being used only 1 century after Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. Very important, the 2 words, moral and philosopher. Why are they important? Because having a moral attitude towards society, a little bit like his problem was, in a world where many people don't have enough to eat or to survive, how can we find a way to improve the wealth of nations? So it has nothing to do with economic theory. It's just a social preoccupation first, because he was a moral philosopher. Let's start from this point, because otherwise we don't get the point. So it was Galileo Galilei also. Why? Because all those who were involved in analyzing societal problems and issues linked to economy or whatever said he was nonsense. That's everybody knew, so they were saying against him that the origin of wealth and the development of wealth has to do with agriculture. Full stop. Everything else is just losing your time. Just an anecdote. There was a medical doctor who was the doctor of Madame Pompadour, the lover of the King of France, who, by the way, his name is Kenneth, and he is very much considered by economists historically because he developed the first analysis in statistical and mathematical terms, which then were used and developed by economists. And he said, oh, well, Adam Smith is nonsense. the real wealth of nation is agriculture. Okay? Now, I guess this is a good reference of what I have in mind. Let's get to the second point. In 1972, the Club of Rome published a book on the limits to growth. Most of you remember, maybe. And then it started with others, but it had the main glory. All the discussion about sustainability, economic development, new era, etc. Now, what has happened from 1972 until today? A slowly diminishing return of the economy. In the middle of this period, reaching 2-3% annual growth per year was considered very good. It was already a little bit lower than 6% per year in 1972. And so on, and now we are in a situation in which this long term, which up and downs by the cycle, clearly going downwards, is around zero these days for the developing nations. So the point is, why this happened? I'm still today surprised that first, the majority of my friends economists never studied why we were so successful until 1972 in Europe, United States, Japan, incredible growth, etc., and why it did start stopping. The idea is there are limits to growth, very general. The main reaction of economists was to say, don't you worry, prices go up, and then scientists will find the answer, making supply elastic, which means capable of facing problems. The point is that the supply of research and development depends, provided you already know that you have available systems of production totally new and really elastic. They tried with a lot of products having to do with touch hands in Canada, etc., etc. It didn't work. Even today, one is at the end of the day, after so many years exploiting touch hands in Canada, etc., etc. But it took a lot of time, which means there is a logic in science and technology, especially when it's based on basic fundamental science, that has its own developments. And many of these developments happens by chance when it is fundamental knowledge. So this is something to be taken into consideration. There is nothing magic about science and technology. Technology is the development of what you know. Science, basic science, has to do with discoveries. You don't know what they are. And they don't happen simply because prices go up. So there is an implicit, insidious possibilities of rigidity in economic production that has to do with understanding correctly what science and technology are. Now, this is the point. So the point is that economic development went down. Is it simply a question of rigidity of science? I tried already at that time, and now even more, the idea that the limits to growth were not the limit of growth per se at all. Jesus Christ, I mean, we have had limits to growth since the period when men invented iron, copper, and then whatever else. Then comes a period in which things start going on again, but on a different level, in a different way. What was the way? Again, here is a little bit the answer I gave Galileo. It's very simple. What the idea, the hypothesis, may be wrong, is that in that period, during the 70s, the way the question was to answer correctly to the question, how you produce wealth in general terms. And one possible answer is the following. There has been a change equivalent to the change from agriculture to industrialization, manufacturing system of the period, which has been described by Adam Smith. By the way, it's not that industrialization has replaced total agriculture, of course. It's only that it has become the prime mover of economic development. When you are the prime mover, you determine all the others. You don't destroy the others. You integrate, you industrialize agriculture. It's not necessarily that you substitute totally agriculture. And today what has happened in that period, in this period of time, is the substitution as a prime mover of economic wealth and activity of services. Every economist recognized today in their writings that 80% of people working in the economy are on services. But still they have in mind that the economy is divided in agriculture, in that industry, and services. Not so. The majority of activity of services are within the industrial activity. And this starts with research and development. It starts with planning the new, even industrial production. It goes with logistics, with storing of materials, with distribution of material, with selling of their products, etc., down to the point in which any type of product or system becomes waste. And here, again, there will be a fantastic occasion for my friend ecologists, but they are very superficial very often. It's enough for them to say economists are not enough, we are the good ones. They are out of the track, because waste is strictly linked to the production system. The production system very fundamentally based on service functions, and this, of course, makes a difference. Now, the point is, it becomes larger, because a difference in the production system is a difference in culture. Why this? When Adam Smith, give me 3 minutes. When Adam Smith started his book, without realizing, he provided the foundations for economic theory. You start from Adam Smith, you start defining what? The notional value. What is value? Value is the value added provided by industrial production and all the things that are linked with that, productivity or whatever else. Now, in the case, this within the intellectual framework of the 19th century, in which one was looking for scientifically defined realities, meaning by scientific something objectively true, definitely true, clear, fixed, etc. Now, in this period, the notion of value added, in fact, as I like to call it, is a tautology. It is a situation in which you have an equilibrium system. But what does it mean? It's very, I think it is, even for non-economists, is equilibrium between the cost of supplies and the fact that demand accept a certain level of cost, and the price is fixed in the market. All the idea of the value added, and then all the rest of thinking is linked to this market issue, equilibrium system. There is a problem here. Equilibrium system in a moment in time. Yeah? And, okay, I don't go back to all the literature about the use value, etc. But in a moment in time, which means that when, for instance, even today, somebody is saying this equilibrium is a little bit imperfect, most economists will say, yes, we know it's imperfect. But some of them still say, with the increasing of information, we get to a point in which the equilibrium will be perfect. This is ideology, is nonsense. Why? If you go back to services, you discover that services are not an equilibrium in a question of even the price for the service activity, are not the consequence of an equilibrium system. They are an accumulation of costs in a period of time. Services means that you switch your attention from an equilibrium situation, so to speak in economic terms, to a situation in which you start from research, basic research, applied research, etc., distribution, utilization, waste, etc. And this happens in a period of time. Of this period of time, the utilization period is in the future. And then there are the costs of waste, which means that the economic system, the positive side is the utilization period of a system or of a product, if you like, in many cases. And then the cost of it is spread over time, which means that being spread in a period of time, it is based on uncertainty, is based on risks. You don't get out in economics of the notion of uncertainty and risk. The game is about risk management, the reduction, not the elimination of risk and uncertainty. This is the practice of every day. And the more you have services linked to the utilization of any product, the more you have to do with vulnerabilities, cost of services, and the capacity to manage the situation from a risk management point of view. And if you observe, nobody's very much is going down on this issue, but even this morning, how many times people is putting in evidence in the modern world the increase of risks and vulnerabilities, and so on and so forth. This is obvious, because on the other side, what somebody has a problem to accept is that the higher the level of technology, the more services you need, because you need more and more costs to be used and abilities to be used to manage products, hard products, to manage hard systems. And this creates a situation in which you have more uncertainties potentially than otherwise. Just to explain that I then spent 25 years to work for the insurance industry, I have not yet convinced them. I had to tell the insurance people, gee, you know how to fix the prices for something that you will pay in 25 years' time. And therefore you are the center of the economy. Well, the culture of most of the insurers are not up to this point. They don't have this privilege. They prefer to be hidden, because maybe they have some reserves with them, and so on and so forth. But again, this of course is macroeconomics. I'm not talking about microeconomics, because our world is so developed. There are so many activities everywhere that in the microeconomics, at the end of the day, common sense is dominant. And because most of human people are reasonable, common sense allows you to be an entrepreneur in all directions. And this saves society. I would even say that these economic difficulties we have these days in some countries, in Europe and the United States, find a way, because the society is so complex. Somebody even said this morning, I was very happy, that the plurality of possibility is such that in a sense overcomes macroeconomic inadequacies. And these are macroeconomic inadequacies, and they are there because people start still providing measures, economic and financial measures. The question is how we shall tomorrow substitute the automobiles, without understanding that even when first you produce an automobile, it costs more to plan it, to assemble the parts, to distribute it, etc., and so on and so forth. And even if you look at Apple miracle of Steve Jobs, you find out that his success is fundamentally due to his capacity to organize the marketing issues linked with, of course, technology. Yes, and one must not have the idea that services and products are different. Services are there because you have to use products. The question is how much of the economic costs have to go to the performance of services, and how much the production of a computer or whatever. And then you see that there has been a big scaling of the difference, a big increasing of the difference between the cost of manufacturing per se, which is 20% at most, in most of the cases, and so on and so forth. So what let me come to a very challenging conclusion. Maybe because I'm old, I'm saying nonsense. It's possible, don't you worry. But the point is this: the economic crisis we are facing today, is it simply what one is talking about, or it is partly because many economists, like me, more or less, economists have misunderstood and therefore given wrong directions to how to overcome the crisis. My point of view is we have to go deeper if you talk about macroeconomics and not believe that it's just a gimmick for economists to teach at the university. The question is to find out, are we to the point in which Rome started the discussion? The only big difference is to say, instead of having a situation in which there are limits to growth, in fact there has been a change in the way in which the wealth of nations is produced. We passed from agriculture as first mover to industrialization and manufacturing as third mover to a service situation as first mover in a philosophical condition in which risk management and the idea that value is something probable is something to be fixed within the framework of a mentality. It's a little bit like in physics, starting from Einstein, who said at the end of the day that God doesn't play with the dices, to the situation in which modern microphysics is putting at the top of their thinking the notion of uncertainty. Thank you.
Thank you, Oria. That's a very provocative beginning because you touched on the reason for all of the panel issues that we want to discuss. Because you pointed out the concept that the economy is static, it has to be challenged, it is a constantly moving environment. The very basic assumption of equilibrium is in question. The idea that we're moving towards greater certainty is very questionable because uncertainty is the very nature of our life, and our efforts of society to reduce certainty, or rather manage risks, as you said, is the nature of what economy and society is all about. So this is a wonderful introduction to why we have framed these panel discussions. Before we go to the panels, we have two brief, I would request the presenters, individual presentations. First one, Goran Guvenin, and then by Professor Monti. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, for my apologies, I mean, there are 39 pages. I had to read in 10 minutes, so I can only make some comments. But in any case, there is one. Plus, we have the paper, 13 pages paper, which is sent. Yes. So well, very quickly, I mean, dealing with socioeconomic phenomena means that to deal with mathematical complexity, to deal with mathematical chaos, and to deal with low predictability. Mathematical complexity, in other terms, in socioeconomic phenomena, is function of n variables in time to predictability. Mathematical chaos, I mean, to be very brief, I mean, I will go to this figure. Here, I just. Thank you. So, what I tried, I mean, I took 250 years, and this is purely a theoretical, I mean, modeling a revolution, in a case of today, of socioeconomic phenomena. So these are, I mean, just chaos. In other terms, the first chaos is created by Steve Ball. What is the simple definition of this chaos, or the first industrial revolution? Maybe, in a sense, the capacity of carrying 2 tons with a speed of 6 to 8 kilometers per hour, to have a capacity of carrying thousands of tons with a higher capacity. this certainly should be regarded as here. So this is the steam power. It's really a count. So it moves the socioeconomic phenomenon, a revolution, to a much higher strata. Let's put the information and communication technology. It's the same issue. I will give some figures now very quickly. And where did we reach in terms of capacity and technology? So it's another count. Certainly I took here as an example, world dominance, the dynamics and chaotic impacts on dominant technologies. And finally, the last revolution, I would say, and probably more important than the first one, nanotechnologies, nanobiotechnologies, and the general project. So it's really remarkable. When you work at the level of million of a millimeter, you are completely different structure. And it will change, I think, substantially the coming years and the coming decades. So from here, I would like just to move very quickly. Yes, I said chaos and then low predictability. Unfortunately, dealing with socioeconomic phenomena, you have to be ready to accept high error margins, not only in terms of statistics, which had some modest national and international experience. When I was for 7 years, Association of Turkey, in agricultural statistics, our error margins were at the level of 15%. Sometimes in directions may change. So, and in terms of quality, also value, etc., the information errors and information distortion. So, in that sense, we are dealing really with complex issues and more predictability issues. And error margins are very high. So I would like immediately, given the time constraints, to move to information distortion. Because here, again, in socioeconomic phenomena, certainly we deal with information. So data, information, knowledge, and if you have wisdom, you have decision. Right? So definitely the raw product is data, and then we make it information, and the added value that it becomes knowledge. Well, if you're lucky. So let's move to page 12. Yes. Here, just to give you a very brief idea of the electronic data. So, research shows that by 2050, the amount of electronic data created and stored will grow to more than 60 times the 130 exabytes. As you can see, 130 times the power 18 compared to that. This gives you an idea of the capacity of the electronic, of the information and communication technologies. So from here, I'm go very fast, and let's move. Yes. Here, I'm sorry, I can only make some comments. This is the link. Yeah, what I'm saying is, in any socioeconomic phenomena, in any decision system, or in any analysis, in science, there is this, we call humility, a theorem that I elaborated in 1999. It's called 1998 theorem. It says that to reach any set optimal at the level of individual, at the level of corporation, at the level of institution, at the level of nation state, or this international sphere level, you can certainly, all eccentric factors and variables may change through the time dynamics and space dynamics. But one factor must remain a necessary condition. I don't say constant, because mathematically it should be unchanged. So I use the expression necessary condition. It's alpha zero. Alpha zero is absolute. So, my distinguished colleagues, I can't use these wise words, horrible, referring to the world crisis. I don't know, certainly, you can criticize me. To my very modest interpretation, I will summarize the 2008 world economic crisis. It was a crisis of ethics. Curiously, these financial institutions, investment banks, and non-negligible of them were rather advisors novel or and so on. And it was really a crisis of ethics. I don't know which economic theory can explain. I think the dominant exponential factor is really ethics. So for this reason, I think this theorem in a sense will have a certain sense, I think, to my interpretation. That's right. Let's go. Yeah, these are the main decision makers. I mean, in the decision systems, the main decision makers are nation states, international organizations, transnational corporations, non-government individuals. Nation states are, well, there's also, I apologize, international sphere before that, nation states. But there is a multipolarity between nation states and international organizations, because at the end, the international organizations' budget are paid, by the nation states, and they're always, since I got so many years, you have the ambassador, you have the flight, etc. So the information flow, technically they bring a non-negligible value added to society, but still there is. I don't think that concerning the change in our society, concerning the paradigm shift, in our society, I don't think that it will come from nation states, and I don't think that it will come, with all respect, from international institutions, given their constraints. Certainly, transnational corporations is very delicate, because they are really a dominant factor. Most of the time, to my interpretation, even more important than nation states. Why? Because nation states is extremely difficult to govern. They have so many problems: security, healthcare system, institutes, etc., etc. They have so many, and plus they have to be elected. This means that short-term support, 4 years. So you cannot solve really the problems just like that. So you need long-term. But at the level of transnational cooperation, it's completely different. It's really their optimization function is maximize the profit, maximize your world share, concerning your product or your services. In that case, more than that, transnational cooperation needs $150 to $200 billion. They represent 51% of the world economy. So they have the finance, they have the capacity at the level of their top level management, and with all respect to the politicians, certainly on the average, they are higher, certainly in that sense, compared to politicians, and they also, a bit embarrassed, it's well known, they also finance, politics, etc. Means that they are in a position also to regulate the global system, at least in a non-negligible way. In that sense, transnational corporations are very important. I equal certainly the fund. So in that sense, I think we need to look at capital. And then non-governmental organizations are important, but you have to look at how they are financed. I think financially the solution may come in long term to the individuals. But just, 1, 2, 100 million, 1 billion, 2 billion, 2 billion people. If people may have the consciousness of the dynamics of the world to understand the complexity and the system and the solution, why things are done, why it's just we take a paper and we say, Mr. X, Mrs. Y, I'm not looking for you because 4 years ago you said I'm going to do X, Y, Z, L, and you haven't done it. I'm not going to vote for you. That's enough. But if we can act in that way, I think we can start. And the second one is at the level of corporations. How to act towards corporations. We know that there are corporations, and certainly we observe the examples. In Africa, in Latin America, just to keep the monopoly of their goods, they were financing the dictators, and then thousands, sometimes 10,000 of people died because of that. In that sense, we say, look, this product that you produce is excellent, but I'm not going to buy it because you finance dictators and thousands of people die because of that. If we can do that at the level of billions of people, we can stop. And there are examples. In that sense, because they need the demand. In that sense, so if they don't demand, they can't do anything. And then they change the image of their corporation. So they finance in that case education. They finance environment, etc., etc. And we have seen the examples, and we know everything how it goes. So But this is the figure is important. I mean, I elaborated several times. I mean, it was about. Yes, thank you. Thank you. What I'm saying here, that in 2013, what's really our society, our world is driven by power and the power of money. So power of money driven social economy. I know it's very sharp, but if I take it in the Gadamer sense, I go to the ancient signals and to hermeneutics. I took all the emballage and I look at what is really the ancient. In that sense, if you like, the world in that sense is driven by power and power of money. I know it's very sharp, but I want to have a criticism. What I'm saying, this is in science methods, my post-method. The normative approach, what should be is ethics, system one, science, technology, innovation, production processes, demand and supply chain, value system is extremely important. Culture, ethics, culture, ethics, social response, the sustainability, global consciousness, and decision process systems. So, here are just external interactions of system one, the one that I propose, I mean, the normative one. Yes, I explained the world. Here I'm at the max. I explained the theorem, the European Union economic crisis. I think the European Union economic crisis is a crisis of heterogeneity. Because it's a very heterogeneous structure. Take from Germany until etc. 27 countries. Mathematically, we don't have an optimal. European Union doesn't have an optimal. At the level of 27, at the level of 70. In that sense, the solution problem is extremely hard. So I can certainly discuss, I can actually given the time, but this is why I'm elaborated. It's really structural heterogeneity, which is an extremely complicated problem. They, for example, created, this one criteria, 2010, and the target was, will reach the level of productivity at the level of cutting-edge technologies, etc., of the United States. At the time I was saying to my students, with all respect that I have to Europe, they can't do that, they can't do it. Because the best range goes to the United States, still growing cheaper, and given this heterogeneous structure that it is now, I hope that things may change, but I have some doubts. Value added decision analysis, information is important. This is extremely important, and I will finish here again. In the society that will live, the flow of information is meant, and they just sum that on electronic. But if we take the full thought of information, the scientific, what we call scientific, and you may call the remaining part. Scientific is an estimation that doesn't exceed 2% of the total flow of information. But even in scientific information, we have error. But these errors can be honest errors, just realized by the authors, but can be, in a sense, function of a demand, a certain demand, in order to create demand. You know what I mean? This is hard, in a sense. If there are just, I'm sorry, I take just pharmaceutical industry, one box of medical product, $10 billion turnover. I mean, biasness can be easily created, for creating demand. So that information, knowledge, wisdom, and these are how, in a sense, methods to provide accuracy of minimum error margins. How can you reach through these methods in order to realize minimum error margin and information distortion? Information distortion exists at all levels, and it's very important. We reach today in concerning the information distortion at a level which really, which I call information pollution. It's called information pollution. It's really exceeded in a certain sense the environmental pollution, and we need to have because with this material information we take decisions, and we elaborate knowledge, and this is highly distorted at all levels. I can give very complete examples. In area of all disciplines. And at the end of solution, etc. So I better stop here. Thank you. Thank you.
My apologies, Lauren, that we didn't give you all the time you deserve and need for your very interesting presentation. I think this will be helpful to us as we go through the panel discussion, because many of the issues that Oren has highlighted will come up in the panel discussion. He started by talking about ethics. As with Oreo, he highlighted the issue of uncertainty. He emphasized the issue several times of power-driven systems, the power of money. And we have to remember this economic system we have is part of a political system, and the political system is part of a social system, and it's driven not only by values but also by power structures. And if we're going to understand the changes that need to take place, we also have to be conscious of where power is being exercised, not just where efficiency, in the name of efficiency. So thank you again. Professor Mati.
Good afternoon. Are you sleepy? I am too. I suppose all of us remember old Latin sentence. Quod licet, Jovi non licet bovi. Remember? I'm sorry, but developed word. This is Jovi. And undeveloped word, this is bovi. And very different criteria existed in those two so different forms. The modern world, unfortunately, more and more increases the difference in the level of development between its highly developed pole and the other undeveloped. Increasingly, the new knowledge is created in lesser number of countries, and all the less it can be expected that some significant technological achievements are being made in the underdeveloped part of the world, and even in the part that can be considered as moderately developed. In the world, the created gap is growing, and the polarization is more brutal. Intellectual elite in the developed countries is even more aware that this gap, when it becomes socially unbearable, will potentially jeopardize its no pleasant position. If overcoming the gap is metaphorically presented as a construction of a bridge between two distant shores, then it can be ascertained that for some section of the bridge there are several favorable conditions, but the number of unfavorable and hardly constructed section is growing. Favorable conditions are standard meta language of science and development has become only one, and with its usage, the language barriers are globally overcoming. My opinion is that outstanding success of some underdeveloped countries can be attributed to the English language, which is the language of higher education in India, Ireland, Pakistan, etc. And the number of universities with education in English is growing more in China, Japan, and other countries which do not have positive British colonial legacy. Second.
Can you show the slide? Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Global development of computer telecommunication applications, which has experienced its coronation with the Internet, increasingly facilitates communication among those who are interested in new knowledge. Plenty of print and online articles, books, and magazines are essentially relieved people in underdeveloped countries to accept the knowledge created in the most developed countries. This relief is substantially aided by cheapening the computer and telecommunication equipment. Even a long time ago, market's character was recognized as a phenomenon which is relentlessly striving to extend, and there we devalue every effort for prevention of spreading the technological and scientific results. Each administratively imposed embargo on the proliferation of technology after some time ceases to be effective. Given the fact even some small countries get their chance if they define their technology policies in the right way, such as, for example, Israel, Finland, and etc. Unfortunately, with these three positive parts, they number mostly ends. The main unfavorable section of our breach is weakness for the action which arises from poverty. Poverty of school systems, especially universities. Now, even in Europe, there are universities with €1,000 per student per year, compared to those who have an average of €2,000 per student per year, and the elite numbers tend to be in €50,000 per student per year. It's hard to expect a high quality of education in those fields mentioned. When full university, with the help of the talent of small part of its students, succeed to produce a desirable quality for the developed world, the brain drain enters to the sea, because human characteristic is the migration towards better conditions. Lack of investment potential required for the development of research institutions and funding research projects in poor countries makes it impossible to create at least somewhat attractive jobs for producing quality elite in the country. I am acquainted with the scientists' responses in my own country when they have achieved beautiful results in diaspora. When asked whether they will return to their country because there is no more war, their standard response is, "What would I have to do at home?" In some countries, even European, in which there is no shortage of certain resources and comparative advantages, which could have some perspective towards the moderate development, inadequate or no development policies are being led because the decision makers are engaged in nationalistic conflicts and manipulation, corruption, and other forms of backwardness. Guilt cannot be attributed only to them, because in Europe, none of them came to power in a coup, but has been chosen by democratic methods, which cast doubt on the meaning that some democratic procedures can be implemented in all circumstances and in all places. Solutions to improve the situation are less dependent on the scientific results of natural and exact sciences, but they are more in the sphere of sociology and international political and economic relations, For example, all the scientific and technological knowledge required for building a hydroelectric power plant are known and available to all over 100 years. And the problem for building such a source of electric power exists even today, but are in the field of sociology, ecology, etc. This is only one example which shows that development constraints are not only in scientific results of modern science. A stock of complete research results in some fields of science is such that some of the results will not be implemented for decades. It is obvious that the definition of investment priority in research must take care of it and, where appropriate, emphasize in the foreground the researches which led to the emergency implementation. For example, cheap drugs available at a price to the wider population, which is now difficult to imagine, or medical procedure to. As you can see, the noble title of our forum, Impact of Science and Technology on Society and Economy, has more obstacles than opportunities when it comes to the underdeveloped parts of the world. I suppose that position of the elite in the world now is in very dangerous area. Can you imagine those pressure of immigration from the underdeveloped world to developed world? Now, developed world has only one ideology for defense: military and police forces. Responsibility of the scientists in developed world is to solve the problem inside of the underdeveloped world, because they cannot do that alone. Thank you.
Our challenge is becoming more complex over time, and I'm heartened by a wise thought I once heard, that confusion is a higher form of knowledge. Because we have to break out of our present understanding before we can hope to have a higher one. And what we heard just now from Professor Mati is that knowledge, technological innovation, educational quality, investment in research, nationalistic conflicts, sociological, ecological factors are all real inputs to the wealth of nations. And it was interesting when we started Cadmus, Oreo insisted on the subtitle for the journal, The New Wealth of Nations. What is really the basis for the wealth of nations? So I'm going to encourage a little more confusion before the afternoon is over. Those of you who have a thirst for simplicity may not be satisfied, because I think it's important that our purpose today is to get everything on the table, even if they're only the questions, and let's not be in a hurry to come to the final answers. I see two hands up, and I fully understand that, and I'll take the two hands briefly, but we have 6 panels, which are really the heart of the session, and we'll only have time for 2 before the break, so I'd ask you to be brief. Morgan.
I just want to offer some encouragement to the professor. And tomorrow I'll tell you my personal observations of science and technology development in a developing country, Canada. Because I'm old enough now to go back to to the early stages where we were facing a kind of a depressing picture. Maybe not with war, but it was a cold country for innovation.
Yeah, but Canada is member of OECD.
That time was not.
That is no advantage, which I'll show you tomorrow.
Canada is very developed country.
Now,
of course.
if I may express a concern about the picture which has been painted up to now. Seems to me there is missing an essential element which is new in history. That is, we are facing a problem of sustainability. Some express it as the survival of the species. But that's my concern, also for the 6 panels who are coming, that this sustainability issue, even complex, is absent, then we can forget the old discussion. This is new. This is new in historical. It has been coming on the table, let's say by chance, by the existence of the creation of the IPCC and the whole climate debate, which is not ended, but which has so stimulating intellectually that we cannot bypass that anymore. So I think that's my concern. So, but it's so forthcoming that when the sustainability issue or concept is not present in our discussions, I think we are missing an opportunity.
Thank you. Just to clarify. Yes.
Just 30 second answer.
Please.
Well, my apologies, dear Raul. It's on page 24.
I think a more general answer, I'm glad you raised it, is we look at the different sessions of this conference not as airtight compartments. We are all of the sessions of the conference are talking about one thing: human security and human welfare. Because we can't talk every subject at the same time, we already have enough confusion, I think. We're trying to take it systematically, and the next session is on the sustainability issue, and all the sessions are on it. But we'll give due credit and due respect to all concerns, but that doesn't minimize the importance of the issues that are on the 6 panels. We didn't try to be inclusive of everything in this session because we can't be. That's why we have multiple sessions.
Okay, I do.
That's okay.
That's just one thing. This morning there was a session, I don't know if the person is still there, on innovation. There's no word on sustainability within innovation. So I'm sorry about that. I feel concerned and somewhat responsible being a member of the board. That has to be addressed. Yeah. So there's no escape on it.
No.
Or it is a failure.
It's under the ashes.
What?
Sustainability is under the ashes.
Okay. May I request, for the first panel, may I request Jerry and Graham and Walter to come up, please. And I apologize in advance that we're going to have to compress the length of these panels, so I'll ask each of you for just 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes for contributions from other participants. The first panel, the topic is the aim of economy, and there are 4 questions before the panelists. You're free to choose which of the questions you'd like to answer. What is the aim of economic systems? On what basis and by what values should the performance of economy be evaluated? What values are implicit in our conception of economy? And how appropriate are they to its social function? What is the traditional concept of efficiency in economic theory, and how far is it relevant to the wider role of economy and society?
As I listen all morning today and now to the litany of problems that we face, I'm reminded of the
couple of things. First, the experience that a migrant has going into a new culture, something which the anthropologists call cultural shock. You discover an increasing number of problems because you look for the word in the dictionary and you say that word and people don't understand what you're meaning, and these series of misunderstandings increase up until about 2 years, and then you gradually move out of this into a new concept of reality, and then you're a stranger in both your home culture and the new culture, but you have a new level of understanding. Thomas Kuhn talked about some of these same kinds of problems in the paradigm shift. In other words, he speaks about a period of growing anomalies, outcomes of experiments which don't match what you're expecting to find, a whole set of unexpected outcomes. And these build up, oftentimes leading to a period of chaos when you have a whole number of different schools of thought which are trying to resolve this issue until you come up with a new paradigm, and then there's a shift, a kind of Gestalt shift. The Gestalt shift is a very important meaning. You've seen these pictures on the Gestalt shift phenomenon, where you're looking at one picture and suddenly you're seeing a completely different picture. And this is exactly what happens. In other words, the mind makes a shift to see something completely different. So let me just say a couple of things about, just add to the number of anomalies perhaps, to address some of the presuppositions, the things that are taken for granted as we look at this list of anomalies that are accumulating in our world. One is the idea that happiness can be measured by money. This is the basic assumption of economics. And therefore, the more money you have, the happier you are. So money has to increase if you were to increase your happiness. In fact, there does not seem to be any asymptote that this money will increase indefinitely. Your happiness will increase indefinitely within the confines of economic theory. Of course, we all know that's not true, but economists simply don't look at that. All the science of technology are directed towards the material level. We're speaking about material goods and services. We're speaking about products. So all of our education and innovation and progress is directed towards increasing the number of material goods and services that we have. No attention is given to emotional needs. This is a whole set of needs which is simply not covered anywhere in science and technology, especially in economics. It's a problem somewhere else. If the economists, you pose an ethical question to an economist and say, well, that's the problem in ethics. That has nothing to do with economics. So there's a kind of basic problem with the idea of economics as a separate science. It's somewhat, I compared this to the idea that you could have a science of cardiology without being anywhere in any way concerned with biomedicine. The idea you can have a science of nephrology and endocrinology without recognizing this as part of biomedicine. So the whole idea of economics as a science, I think, is a problem that needs to be addressed. Society is one thing. There should be a social science, and all of the people who study society should be conscious in the same way that anybody studying medicine is conscious of the entire human body, not just the one organ or system that we're concerned about. There should probably be a change in the whole educational philosophy where we have a social science and where economics is a specialization that takes place after you have a sense about all these other things. They're not somebody else's problem, but actually a problem in economics and political science and sociology and anthropology and psychology and so forth. It's all part of the same system, and the system needs to be what we're informed of. Okay?
Thank you, Gary. Where I come to this, I was trying to answer the question about what is the aim of economics. Is that economics is trying to answer a question which it's actually incapable of answering. That today, we see economics as the way we measure progress. That progress is about economic growth, it's about increasing GDP. And that's not what progress is actually about at all. But to the scientists among you, that's not very obvious. But for most of you, if you pick up the newspaper, if you watch television news, progress is about GDP, is about growth. And the way we generate growth is through consumption. The biggest parts of all our economies are unity consuming, like TVs and software shirts. And so we have to keep consuming more to have growth and progress. And the way we consume more is either by earning more, which we're not doing, or by borrowing. So what we've been doing for the last 30 years is borrowing. We've been taking on more and more debt so that we can consume more, so that we can grow more, so that we can have something we call progress. And that whole model to me seems to be completely wrong. Progress is not about growth. It's not about how much we increase GDP. It's not about wealth. When Adam Smith wrote his book about wealth of nations, it's not about how countries get rich. It's about how they improve the well-being of their citizens. So it's easy to say what economics is not about. But then what is it about? It's about well-being. Is it about happiness? Well, this is where I come back to my point at the beginning. I don't think economics is able to answer the question about what it's about. It's about like asking a 5-year-old, what do you want to do with your life? A 5-year-old can't answer that question. The question that economics is trying to answer, the several questions that I see, is first of all, what do we want to achieve as a species? As humanity, what are we trying to do with our lives? And economics is trying to say it's about growth, it's about money, it's about debt, it's about consumption, and that's not what we're trying to achieve. The second question we need to answer is, what should our relationship be to nature? And economics is completely failing to answer that question. It's ignoring the value of nature, and that's why we're burning down rainforests and emptying the oceans of fish, because we have no way of valuing what we're doing with those natural resources. The third question is much more closely related to economics, which is, how do we achieve the highest standard of living for the greatest number of people on the planet? And then the final question is, how do we nominate people to answer these other two questions? And those, to me, are the fundamental questions we need to be asking. We need to be extending economics into many more fields of intellectual activity, into philosophy, into moral philosophy, back to Adam Smith's text, into social development, into politics, into science, into arts, to build a model of what we are trying to achieve as a species. Because what we're not trying to do is grow, because growth has no purpose other than to do something else. And we haven't answered the question of what that something else is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think both speakers are right, because both speakers are wrong. And I'd like to solve this seeming contradiction by answering the question, do we need a new economy? And the answer, of course, is and was and always will be no. We have to go back to our old economy. Not to Adam Smith. Well, he was okay, but he wasn't right at the bottom. Of course, we have to go back to Aristotle. And with Aristotle, we see economy is a part of ethics. It's not that there are some ethical issues within the economy, but economy is a part of ethics. So, the father or the mother, in a non-paternalistic tradition, father or mother, looking for the well-being of their children at home. That's the literal translation of economy. Oikos is the home. It's looking after the well-being of your children. That's the way we look at things. So what I'm saying is maybe we have to, rather instead of look for a new economy, we have to look for the obstacles which prevent us from seeing the old economy, or what economy ought to be. Well, if we look at the obstacles, then we do what we call thinking out of the box. Which box are we in? Well, we obviously are in the language box. We're in the language box. We're talking about, and even this conference is doing it, we're talking about human capital. As if humanity was an economic category. It's not. It's not, or at least it's not only an economic category. And therefore, one of the obstacles, or one of the ways of getting rid of the obstacles, is looking at the language we're using, or looking at the metaphors we're using. So human capital being one of those obstacles. Another obstacle is, that's been quite frequently mentioned already, is the notion of value, which quite obviously is not being reduced to economic values. There are values, as one of the German presidents has once stated, there are values which you can't sell or buy at stock exchange. There are values which you can't sell by stock exchange. And that's the values we're talking about. That's the aim of economy. The aim of economy is looking for the values which you can't buy or sell in the stock exchange. Which doesn't imply that, of course, you can look if you sell or buy papers on stock exchange, you can look for the sustainable assets you can buy there. And now I'm maybe just briefly commenting on one of the main problems we have with, again, the metaphors we're using. Sustainability is an optimization function over three factors: our economy, our environment, and our social acceptability. And these three things are so different that you have to look, and we heard it this morning, you have to look for a medium into which you can translate the values of the three. And now the problem is, the medium we are presenting it is money. So again, we have the economic dimension there. So we're not talking about sustainability. If we go for the triple bottom line definition of sustainability, we're just focusing again on the economic aspect of sustainability, and that again is one of the boxes we should try to get out. Last remark, and that's concerning what you just said, and what others said, what Maria says at the beginning, limits of growth or growth. And I think both are wrong and both are right. Why? Because if you want to limit something, you need another force. It's not limiting itself. You look at the curves, the graphs of all growth, and you see it's exponential at first, and then it becomes logistic. And the question is, why does it become logistic? And the answer is, because something else is growing. Therefore, of course, we need constant growth, but in quite different aspects. So in quite different realms. So if we're looking for the limits of economic growth, we're looking for ethical growth. And if we're looking behind these, we see that behind all these limitations of growth, there is always a change in technology. We have always used some kind of new technology in order to limit growth. So that's the attempt to answer the first question.
Thank you. Thank you. We have time just for a couple of short comments or questions. Yes.
Just a quick comment to the first panelist. I say that money is happiness. I disagree with this on this point. Completely disagree, because it seems to me like a Berlusconi's type vision, that one. And I would say that happiness will be health first, then later on lack of people dying by starvation and by war, and then also possibly a sustainable environment. So that would be, and then later on money. Thank you.
I like
all the presentations, but there are some thoughts that cross the mind. First of all, that sustain means to maintain. So, are we here to maintain the mistakes of the past? Are we here to continue with the same mistakes by making small reforms that actually mean losing time? Or are we ready to think on ways on how to build the new society. The society that maintains life, the society that gives happiness, provides peace, provides cleaning of the oceans, gives back innocence, ensures biodiversity. I mean, these are parameters that are needed, and this is a new project. So we have to decide on a major direction to take, because I only think of the formulas on how to make these small changes. We'll never get it.
That's exactly the topic for seventh afternoon. Thank you. Okay, one more, David.
Thank you very much. It's my first time here, and I am really blown away by the amount of talent and ideas, and I can see if you say you're confused, Gary, imagine how confusing it is to pick out a couple of things and zero in on them. But without rambling, I just wanted to ask a question. It's only partly a rhetorical question. Maybe somebody could define when I hear we should do, we should. Who are we? That would be, I think, very helpful, because the title of the forum says impact of science and technology on society and economy, but doesn't say where. So would it be, or is it on purpose done, should a geographic aspect be introduced to this? And I think I like Professor Matich's idea that there are different types of countries. What I would like to ask is, how would our discussions relate to a 13-year-old kid somewhere who uses Kalashnikov as a credit card, or somewhere in the darkest corner of the DRC? That's why I'm saying, who is we? And the last point that Graham made about the third objective of raising the standard of living of your population. How many leaders in the world think of this? They'll just throw out those questions.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the next panel. If I could ask Graham, please remain, and Jerry, and Robert, you come on. We'll end this, we'll stop for a coffee break after this panel, and then we'll divide into two sessions. Second panel is on the boundaries of economics. Please, the questions that we have asked the panelists: what are the monetary, political, social, and Raoul, this one is really for you, ecological borderlines that separate and link economics to the wider society of which it's a part? What is the place and relevance of the non-monetarized sector to the science of economics? How far is contemporary economic theory integrated with these wider spheres of social existence, which Jerry was alluding to? What conceptual changes are needed for economics to evolve into a true science of society? Well, let's start with you, Robert, because you're...
I'm not quite set up yet, so...
Okay. Graham, you got...
Yeah, I think I can answer the question also by picking up on the question that was asked back there. I think there's two questions. First of all, who should make the changes that we need to see made? Well, I'll tell you who's not. It's not the economists, because they clearly haven't known what they're doing for the last 30 years. And it's not the politicians, because they go to statistics. So it needs to be somebody else, logically. And we had a very interesting meeting at the end of December in Winterthur with Tom Brown, where we invited 60 young people from around the world, people in their 20s, people from Occupy, people from the Pirate Party, people from the Green Party, young people who wanted to create change. And I tell you, it's the most positive sign of change I have seen in the last 20 years, of a bunch of people who are in their 20s, who believe we can make those changes, who are not part of the traditional system. And they, to me, are where we should be starting if we want to create change, as young people who are elevating and changing the team. I think the second question that goes very closely with that one is, when do we need to make those changes? And ideally, we need to make those changes now, because we have the problem today. We have the problem of an economic system which is fundamentally broken, which is not achieving the objectives which has been set. The difficulty comes with that one is that the system today is not geared up to making those changes. And you've seen, I think, from the discussions today, is everybody knows what the fundamental problems are, but they don't know exactly what we need to do next. When question is very important. And again, I think back to some of the questions that we had after the Club of Rome meeting we took around last year, was do we wait until there's a crisis? How we're going to head towards one pretty quickly with the environmental problems we're creating, but also with the financial ones, or do we plan for it and avoid the crisis? And I think, unfortunately, I keep coming back to the conclusion that we have to wait for a crisis. We have to wait for a crisis and we have to prepare and get ourselves ready to deal with that crisis. But until then, there's not much we can do. That's a very beautiful perspective today.
Thank you. My technology is broken down altogether. I'd like to start off with a little bit about where I'm coming from. I'm an economist by training. It took me 20 years to undo that training. And since then I'm a systems modeler, and that's a particular bias that I'll probably defend. The first, in a way, point by way of background is that I was asked by Gary to write a paper on what's wrong with mainstream macroeconomics. And the short answer to that is everything. And the argument is detailed in the background paper that you have in front of you, so I will repeat those arguments. This leads me to several conclusions. First of all, that there is that the notion of the macroeconomics is not valid and not useful. In short, the information loss from aggregation over concept and over process is just plain unacceptable. The idea that, in some sense, an economy can be controlled by two variables called, monetary and fiscal policy, when the system to be, in some sense, intervened in it is complex. From a systems perspective, is just utterly undefensible. I would suggest that there is then a need for not new macroeconomic thinking, but a new synthesis. What I've observed is that there's a tremendous amount of very interesting and valid research in a number of the sub-disciplines of economics and sociology and political economy, including environmental economics, economic history, and so on, that standard macroeconomics fails to incorporate any of the learning from these more empirically based sub-disciplines or disciplines. So what's required is a new synthesis, not a new macroeconomic model, or not even tinkering with the existing macroeconomic model. Third, I would draw the conclusion that there needs to be a change in the fundamental paradigm of macroeconomics. It needs to be no longer Newtonian, which is to say deterministic in systems in which we can't really intervene in because the future is largely determined inside of us, to what I would call an evolutionary systems approach. The fundamental concept of evolution revolves around the notion of knowledge, and knowledge that is transmitted from generation to generation. And it's the property of knowledge that we cannot predict what we're going to learn. And therefore the notion of making prediction doesn't make sense. There's a fundamental uncertainty, in short, that arises because of the uncertain principle of knowledge. I would argue that we need then to focus on well, in the context of doing synthesis, that the only way, in a way by analogy, of dealing with complex systems and the communication of the understanding of complex systems has to do with simulation modeling. By and large, there's no other. We've learned that in a way from climate science. The only way we could bring together all of the bits and pieces of science around the climate system was to be able to simulate and draw together all those bits and pieces of science. And we have to be able to make simulations that are open and comprehensible, so that in a sense we can begin to use the framework as a communication of understanding, and then to explore jointly what are the implications of the actions that we may undertake. In my view, turning a little bit to the scope of economics, it needs to be as broad as possible. And if it's not going to be predictive, I would argue that it needs to be exploratory. In short, what we need to do in economics is to recognize that we human beings are part of the system of interest, and that the future of that system is at least in part determined by what we decide to do, we being human beings collectively. And I think the best, in some sense, a discipline like economics can do is not to say there's a system over there that we're going to look at. There's a system of which we're a part. And the role that in some sense, the technician can play is to lay out what are the possible futures that can be reached from where we are. The notion then of choosing which pathway, if you like, is a political process. It's not an expert process at all. So by and large, the job of the economist, most broadly speaking, is to lay out potential pathways that are comprehensible, so that society can exercise their sense of value and make choices that are within the domain of coherence with scientific laws in the physical science world. And coherence with respect to what I would call the laws of debt or finance. I've perhaps said enough. This will condition my interventions on all of the subjects that follow.
Kuhn suggests that it will be the younger scientists who make the paradigm shift. I just heard from someone, I'm sorry, I don't remember who, I'm suffering from communications overload. You have too many names and people. I don't think that'll help. A class at Harvard in economics walked out of the classroom. So the professor, this is nonsense, you're teaching. The same thing happened at the University of Paris a number of years ago when the graduate students said, this economics is autistic. And they created the Post-Autistic Economics Association, which was apparently too sarcastic, so it finally changed it to reality-based economics. And they have a website, they have a journal, there's now a new World Economics Association composed of all the people who don't think that economics is doing what it should. So the change is already taking place. I mean, there are people who see the anomalies, most of us I think do. There are people who will begin to see the anomalies. There are people who will never see the anomalies. And Kuhn mentions this card test where you put in a red queen spade in a deck of cards, and you flash the cards in front of people very fast at first, and then slowing down, and more people see this anomaly. There are people who at the end you show them this card and they don't see it. So I don't know if Milton Friedman would ever have seen an anomaly in economic theory. I don't know. But we are the ones who are making the change. And the young people who will be influenced by our thoughts and words and will be more daring because they don't have their egos invested in publications. I mean, called the cleaning of the Sistine Chapel. When all these people have written theses and articles and books about the dull colors of Michelangelo, and all of a sudden these bright colors are coming up. And so when they cleaned it with nothing but water and a sponge, they had to analyze every bucket of water to prove that there was no chemical reaction going on at all. They were just feeding off the smoke from someone who used a candle and assist each other. So these are the things that bring about change. And we are in the process of bringing about the change. The young people will actually do it. We'll talk about it, but they'll do it. So,
a couple of very brief comments here.
I wonder whether you're not putting the discipline of economics to central place in what is essentially a political set of issues. Like Graham, you claim economics doesn't have the answer to the questions you asked in were political questions, not economic questions. And having been an observer of politics and economics for some decades, I mean, I think the difficulty we have is whether our political systems can deal with some of these issues. The economic input to political systems is, if anything, too dominant. Politicians are giving the impression that they're in an economic straitjacket. The debt and deficit targets are so, they feel so constrained in their actions that they're paralyzed. I don't believe that is true. I think there is enormous room for political innovation in our systems, even if we don't change our economic straitjacket for a while. And I think it's there that we can see the change. Now, I do agree with you, Robert, that we've known for some 2 decades now that our economies are actually in dynamic change. And we have an enormous literature on non-equilibrium dynamic economic change. But you're quite right that we now know that the only way that you can look at the mid-long term of these systems is simulation. And that's precisely the reason why all of the central banks still use general equilibrium models for short-term steering of the economic system. And I see no alternative to this in the foreseeable future. The non-equilibrium dynamic simulations cannot compete with the general equilibrium models for looking a year, 18 months ahead. So we almost certainly have to live with a dual economic system of knowledge. We have general equilibrium for short-term effects, and we have dynamic simulation for the longer-term processes. But let's not let this overly dominate the political system. Let's not let the economics paralyze the political process. Thank you.
Just 2 very quick comments. I do agree with a lot of the criticisms of the existing economic profession, but on the other hand, as Robert often has suggested, that there's a lot of other interesting contributions coming from within the broader school of economics, like behavioral economics, ecological economics. But even within those groups, I think one of the major problems with the theory we're calling from the training that I received is that the focus always has been on the individual. So when you look at the theory of the individual, there is a dichotomy between that and what happens in society. So it's an identity as an individual, and it's always like an individual who is actually as a market actor, which we normally don't behave even as an individual. But as an individual within a society, my whole choice sets are influenced by a broad environmental conditions. And so, in a way, how does economic theory and the way that we analyze within a social and ecological reality, the 3 key terms that are social, which is the broader society, ecological, because it's within the natural system, we are part of that. And then the reality is what actually happens in the real world. And we tend to forget about that because, again, as many have talked about earlier on, we tend to try to mathematize it. So we make very simple and simplistic assumptions of perfect information, homogeneous preferences, so that we get nice mathematical outcomes. But in a way, we have to relax that to get into the reality of the situation.
Nice comment.
Short comment. I am economist. I guess we are in small minorities here. I'm teaching for 40-something years, but I'm happy to hear critical comments because they are always inspiring. But there is no one economist you are complaining on something which does not exist. There are many schools of economics, and the economics was developing, from physiocrats to classical economics. It was called really political economics at that time, but because it was so bad, it didn't, and was taken finally by Marxists because they just had the new values. And then we moved to microeconomics to be very precise. So, it was an evolution and a response to the changes, which brought. This is why microeconomics was so narrow and so quantitative, because the classical economics, Adam Smith, couldn't resolve those problems. Period. Then we learned in the 20s that we need to have, besides macroeconomics, the crisis within respond with microeconomic tools. So the macro was established. Keynesian economics appeared, and so on. And then, after there were attempts by economists, of course. So this evolution. So there are different schools. Not necessarily all agree that, after Second World War, we saw in the 60s, the 70s, we saw this loud monetarism, But helped a lot, it boost the growth, with the trade liberalization, but didn't resolve all. The institutional economics came, started to resolve those market failures, market deficiencies. It was a kind of solution. But then behavioral economics appeared, particularly now popular because of the crime. But I think that we are still, looking for the changes in the paradigm. It's a process. But besides that, there's one important element. Don't blame economists. We develop many tools which, because of politicians, are not applied. Marshall was talking about externalities, and Pigot suggested this Pigovian tax. If we will use these tools to internalize external negative effects, we wouldn't have global warming. We wouldn't have this. If we use the valuation, we wouldn't deplete the resources. So blame politicians that do not use the tools. Period. Economists, if you are talking about those who are dealing with the theory, we don't have much influence. We are working on the theory, we are disputing, looking for it. One small example, after transformation, when was a type of political institutional vacuum, we came with American Express to Central Europe. We applied many tools which are still on the shelves in the United States because of the political opposition. And we applied in Poland or Czech Republic, in Hungary, because they were new things, and they worked. Thank you.
And just to clarify, our purpose here is not to blame economists at all. Our purpose here is to see if we can frame, if we can begin a discussion that will lead to a more effective social theory for the wealth of nations. That's the only thing we're here for. Not to blame anybody. If anybody's to blame, we're all to blame.